Welcome to Leadership Development News, Profiles and Practices of Top Performers. I'm Dr. Aurelie Nadler, Dr. Kathy Greenberg, my co-host. For the last 20 years, we're ending up our season, and we'll be starting year 20 in January. We just finished the holidays, so hopefully you all had a great holiday. And as we're thinking about 2026 and we're thinking about the future, we have an excellent guest today who's going to talk about the future. He just came up with an article in the Globe, and the article in the Globe is "The Age of Acceleration Has Arrived. Here's how to handle today's chaos and uncertainty." And Kathy and I always are talking about everything today is more. We have more anxiety, we have more loneliness, we may have more anger. And then you throw in AI there, and the sense of the unknown is there. And so we're going to go through some of the issues that Robert has come up with his new book, and we'll walk through 7 mindsets. So with that, Kathy, welcome.
Hey there. I'm happy to be here. A little rusty throat, just getting over that annual bronchitis. I'm sure many of you out there are familiar with that nonsense, but always a pleasure to be here talking about our favorite subject, which is developing leaders. And I think today's going to be an interesting show. I think we are in for a mega force of change in the next couple of years. I think people are really getting used to the use of AI, the application of AI. We talked a little while ago, Relly, about the fear that many people have about their jobs, and we have tried to reassure everybody. First of all, some of the top 10 skills that people need are emotional intelligence skills, and they cannot be replaced by AI. Other skills, obviously, physical labor or physical present jobs like healthcare professionals, teachers with empathy, people who are doing jobs that require empathy, like beautiful, wonderful caregivers. There are so many jobs that are not going away. The creatives in all of us will forever be needed. So, with that said, I'd love to know more about our guest today, Relly.
All right, I'm going to bring on Robert Tucker in just a second. I just want to say one more thing in our intro, and then we're going to intro him, and then we're going to dive into it. So, I mentioned these 4 leadership challenges that we have, and Robert's going to talk about that. His book, Build a Better Future. I've looked through it. 7 mindsets for navigating the edge of acceleration goes through that. But we have more emotional stress. That's number one. I mentioned that. But also, Kat, you talked about it. We have less emotional self-awareness than we ever think. Some of the research by Tara Yurick talks about, 85, 90%. If you ask someone, are you self-aware? Oh, of course I am. I'm self-aware. When it comes down to it, it's more like 15%. And then the other piece you've heard me talk about, Kat, over and over, if you stay on autopilot, you stay average. Well, we're all more average than we want because 95% of the time we're on autopilot, and now AI has made it even more enhanced. And then what we're doing today is picking Robert's brain, and we will call that slow thinking. And slow thinking from Daniel Kahneman's work is so important because we don't do it that much, and now we do it less. And he says we only do it 2% of the time. So we're gonna bring on Robert here, and let me say some words about Robert. So Robert B. Tucker, I've known for many, many years. Robert, I remember we both did a presentation to the Santa Barbara HR Association, Human Relations. It had to be over 20 years ago. Crazy.
If not 100.
100. All right, so let me
Wait a minute, hold on. Wait a minute, hold on. Somebody's had a relationship with you longer than I have. I'm very hurt.
True. Kat and I have been for 20 years, and Kat says all this all the time. It makes me smile. Probably the most, would you say, stable male relationship you've had over all these years.
No, you're just the only one who can put up with me for that long.
That's funny. All right, so let me say something about Robert. So Robert is a globally recognized futurist, innovator, innovation advisor, author, keynote speaker. He spent 30 years helping leaders anticipate change, build the future to be ready. A former journalist, he began his career interviewing the world's leading futurists, which sparked a lifelong focus on high-performing organizations, turning into growth and amid rapid disruption, which we have now. He's spoken in all 50 states, 54 countries, advise organizations ranging from Microsoft to American Express to government to trade associations, and is the author of many influential books. He's a Forbes contributor. He's appeared on CBS News, Bloomberg, PBS, and he's known for blending original research, vivid storytelling, and practical frameworks that help leaders see further up the road and act with confidence. And his book, Build a Better Future, Seven Mindsets for Navigating the Age of Acceleration. So, Robert, welcome.
Well, great to be here.
Well, yeah, I'm very impressed, not only with your relationship with Relly, but also all those wonderful accolades. Let me ask you a question we always ask all of our folks, and you were on the show a while back, so I'm sure you're familiar with this. You know, we like to give our audience an opportunity to get to know our guests. So tell us a little bit about you, who've influenced you, how you got to be the thinker that you are, and a little bit about this new book.
Well, thank you, Kathy. And my hat is off to both of you. I've done a fair number of podcasts, but I don't think any of them have done 700. Is that kind of a good working
Yeah,
number?
just be careful there, Robert, because you're aging me. You're aging me. I'm getting old as the minute goes by here.
No. You're getting younger all the time. But that is a real feather in your cap. I mean, you're obviously producing value for the audience out there, and that's really what I want to do today. It's not to blow my own horn or promote this book, but this time of year, as we transition from one year to the next, is a perfect time to really sort of inculcate ourselves into this notion of the kind of future that we want to build and shape. And that's the work that I've been doing. And you ask about major influences on my life, and wow, what a wonderful first question, because that's near and dear to my heart. I had a real dead-end job maybe 35 years ago or so. I was selling textbooks to college professors, and it was a decent job. I got promoted. I got to Los Angeles, but in my heart, I really wanted to become a writer, a self-supporting writer. That was my goal. And it took being fired to have the courage to say, hey, maybe it's now or never to embark upon this journey. And I bit the bullet and went for it, and I've never looked back. And I've had a charmed career, if I may say so myself. I've never worked a day in my life, even though I'm generally in this office building that I've been in for quite some time. I'm usually the first person to arrive and sometimes the last person to leave, but it doesn't feel like work, because I love what I do. And what I do is constantly interview people. And I've interviewed hundreds and hundreds of innovators over the years. And so it's hard for me to say this person influenced me more. I could tell you who's most famous. Many of the Silicon Valley folks that sort of founded Silicon Valley. Andrew Grove comes to mind. He and I became friends for a while there. And my gosh, Jonas Salk and just so many others. I've interviewed Nobel scientists. I was never interested in doing celebrity kinds of interviews, but that was my start. And then somebody asked me, what do these people have in common, Robert? And so I wrote a book, and it came out in 1986 called Winning the Innovation Game. Because what these innovators had in common were a set of secret skills that turns out all of us can develop. And that led me to do a lot of free speaking. I would speak at chambers of commerce. I would speak at Rotary clubs, Kiwanis clubs. I would drive out to Fresno to appear on radio stations, because back then that was before podcasts, and I would just anywhere a couple of people could sit up and take nourishment, I'd be there. And finally, some guy came up to me and he said, well, I like this stuff. And what would you charge to speak at our company? And I thought, gosh, I have no idea. And it just, it's just taken off from there. Like you said, really, it's 50 states and 54 countries. I've learned a ton. And anyway, so as far as influences, I'm not sure that I could identify any one individual. I mean,
yeah, as I'm listening to you, I think what might be helpful to the audience, because we have such a great array of people listening to us, tell us, just for a point of reference, I'm not sure if everybody knows who some of these people are. Andy, for example, Jonas Salk. So you might just want to share with the audience.
Good. Thank you, Kath. Yeah, Jonas Salk developed the polio vaccine at a time when vaccines were very exciting and acceptable, and polio was a scourge. Dr. Edgar Mitchell was an astronaut that I interviewed, and he was just this visionary thinker, a wonderful guy. I think he was part of the Apollo program. Let's see, people like Dr. Dennis Waitley, who I ended up writing a book with, but a behavioral psychologist. You all may know of his work, The Psychology of Winning. He passed away just recently. And my gosh, John Nesbitt was probably a huge influence.
Right.
He wrote a book in '82, I think it was, called Megatrends.
Right.
And I must have read that book 10 times. It's just, and his point was, the trends, the megatrends at that point were different than the megatrends today. But his point was that if you know the direction of the trends, then you can make better decisions on that. And I've never looked back, because that whole trend watching thing that I teach. I teach people how to do that, because so many people, so much of the time is just wasted. But having our antenna up and really, taking advantage of that. So I think that those are the kinds of people that have fueled my my own career and my own future, because I sort of turned their ideas into products and services for my clients. That's generally how this whole thing worked.
So early on, when I was making the switch from a psychologist to a coach, I listened to a lot of Dennis Waitley, and so your book early on, he was one of the first ones really talk about peak performance. And so let me just read what's in the Globe, and then we're going to have you talk about your book. In the Globe, it just came out today. We are living in a profound and accelerating change, the age of acceleration, and the choices we make today and the choices being made for us about our career, business, investments, and about the future will determine our trajectory in the years ahead. And that's what you wrote, in your book, Build a Better Future, 7 Mindsets of Navigating the Age of Acceleration. So part of this is you talk about disrupt yourself. Maybe that's a great way to start. So why, what is disrupt yourself, and why that?
Well, I know it sounds kind of jarring, disrupt yourself. It sounds almost, but I would say that it is probably the number one most requested presentation that we are asked to deliver these days, because it's necessary to disrupt ourselves before some technology or some other organization or whatever does it to us. And so it's a kind of a proactive stance, so that we don't let grass grow under our feet, so to speak. It's a mental discipline. You and I are in similar fields in the sense that we're both about the mental game of success. Right. And so I would say it's harmonizing with the changes. But I may not like some of the things that are going on today. In fact, almost guaranteed that some of the things that are, some of the changes that we see in Washington and so forth are not to our liking. Nevertheless, we need to welcome change instead of trying to resist it. We need to harmonize with change. We need to use it as a stepping stone. So whenever you encounter a change, maybe it's in your personal life, maybe it's at work, in the workplace. This is happening. Management is having us do this or whatever. I'm not saying you're going to jump up and down for joy with every one of these changes, but what I am saying is that you put it through this process that we talk about in the book, the ditto process. Uh, it simply means that you look at the direction of this trend, you look at the implications of the trend, you look at the threats, who's being threatened by this trend, and then you look at the opportunities, or you look for the opportunities is a better way of saying that. And you see, those are the individuals that I've studied throughout my career that maybe have seen some sort, maybe it was deregulation. And so they saw, hey, we could start a phone company, because it's legal now to do that. Just so many examples could come to mind with regard to looking at the opportunities and giving that enough birth. When I work with companies, I talk about the discovery engine and the delivery engine. And the delivery engine is, getting product out the door, serving customers, turning the crank, getting all that needs to be done, getting it done. But the discovery engine is what we need to pay more attention to these days, because that's about the future. And it's about the future that we want to make happen, rather than the one that, we sort of end up with by default.
Yeah.
So that's a very creative area. That's where emotional intelligence really comes into play. That's where our trend spotting comes into play. But it's this healthy orientation to, no matter what may be seeming like obstacles today, or these are not good times, or this is not what I wanted, to have happening as I'm 72, so I'm, not going to be doing this forever. And just the current political environment right now.
Yeah, absolutely.
So untoward. I mean,
So, Robert, I'm going to ask you, just take a little break right there. We're going to go to a break. And when we come back, I'm sure we're going to talk about some of these mindsets that help us spot these trends. And it's so important for us to stay tuned into these things. And we hope you'll come right back to Leadership Development News.
Welcome back to Leadership Development News. We're talking with Robert Tucker and his book that I think is so pertinent now, Build a Better Future. For more information about Robert, and if you want to get a hold of the book, you can get it at all the outlets. Innovationresource.com. Innovationresource.com is his website, and you can hear about his speaking and in his book. And then, Robert, so the seven mindsets, and like we talked about earlier, kind of the commonality that we all have is helping leaders think differently, think better. So maybe highlight these seven mindsets and maybe how you kind of came up with that.
Absolutely. So let's start with the first one, which is the preparedness mindset. And there in that chapter, we talk about Andrew Smith, who was at a school district when COVID broke out in North Carolina. And he did an exemplary job. I actually discovered him seeing a program on NBC News, and I sought him out. I write for Forbes magazine, so I did an interview with him. But his story was compelling because he wasn't prepared for COVID. Nobody was, right? But he saw, because of his skill set, he saw his team of crisis managers floundering. They were getting nowhere, and days were going by, and they were not making decisions, and the children were not safe. And so what he did was he got permission to take 2 days out, and he cleared his head. And he remembered a process that he had learned in grad school, a risk management or assessment process. And he used that tool. He came back and basically, got everybody back together. And he said, just anything that you're concerned about, any worry that you have, and he put that on the whiteboard, Just, it took all the time he could to surface that. Then they narrowed it down to a list of about 13 scenarios, they called them. Maybe if this happens, what do we do? Then they began the process of thinking, well, now how do we get everybody on the same page if we have to go after this scenario, if this scenario comes to pass? Anyway, the long and the short of that was that you need a process. The preparedness mindset is really about resilience. It is about the unknown and challenging yourself to meet up with the unknown in an organized manner. And it's about expecting the unexpected, because the world that we're living in and the world that we're going into is going to be vastly different. I say in the book that over the next 10 years, there will be more change in that one decade than there has been over the last 100 years, perhaps even more than that. And so how will this manifest? Well, unpack it. Economic trends are going to change, social trends, people being isolated, the kind of things you mentioned at the beginning of the program, right? More and more people will be lonesome. It's an epidemic. So I think some of these trends are going to continue to get worse. For example, just human trust. Social trust has been declining since the 70s gradually, but in the last decade or so, it's really taken a nosedive. Attention, where is attention going? So that's just in one bucket of change, right? So I mean, we could go on with this, but
I think one of the things that people are really interested in these days, Robert, is the idea that innovation is happening so rapidly. And this transformation of the human mindset to one that, quite frankly, is losing some values and principles around information. And I believe you have a new concept here related to looking at information from a different perspective. We talk about human agency, and a lot of people don't even understand what that means. Maybe you can talk a little bit about those concepts.
Wow. So you ask about several things there. And let me just start with your comment on information, because one of the principles that I've talked about from the get-go has been this notion of auditing your information diet. just like we do, our caloric intake, especially this time of year, right? Or after the first. But are you getting the nutritional information? And the innovators that I have interviewed over the years are very, very discerning about the information intake. They don't, just sort of passively become informed. They reach out and actively get informed, right? So there's a difference there. And so I recommend that people sort of look at where their eyeballs are going, because our eyeballs are up for sale these days and to the highest bidder, and they want to keep you on longer. So they're going to feed you more extreme content and feed you that dopamine high. Resist that. Resist it just like you do a big old piece of chocolate cake, right? When you're on a diet. All right. It's the same damn thing, right? Watch where your eyeballs are going and take those eyeballs to, hey, I don't know anything about this topic, or that's a new development within AI. I better read up on that. I rip and clip. I still take paper newspaper. They arrive on the driveway. I'm very retro in this sense, but the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, and then I take a dozen other magazines and read the LA Times. So I'm constantly having my antenna out. When you're out at a soccer match, when you're in the grocery store, it's time to trend watch. On here. It's better to be a listener rather than a talker. It's better to ask questions. That was the thing that I noticed about these guys. When I would go out for my first book, I interviewed 43 leading innovators of that period. And I would go out to interview them, and very soon they would have kind of hijacked the meeting. They would start asking me, what are you finding, Robert? What they were just fascinated. That curiosity, that sort of what Thomas Wolfe, the novelist, called a portable ignorance. Tell me, because you can learn from an Uber driver. You can learn from your seatmate on the airplane. If we'll just ask questions. I want to write a whole book, and that's the point of the whole book, is just ask more questions.
Well, Kathy and I are certainly fans of that. Probably my key score, and I'm a faculty of a coaching school, is curiosity. And how do you ask those questions? And Robert, let me just, for our listeners, I'm going to just highlight the 7 mindsets, and then we can kind of zero in on whichever one you want to go through. So you talked about preparedness mindset. You got the futurist mindset.
Right.
You got the adaptability mindset, the human agency, which we're touching on already, mindset, the long view mindset, the anticipatory mindset, and the visionary mindset. So let's go into maybe the human agency, because I think that's kind of a big one for all of us here. Maybe just kind of explain that a little bit, and then just like you did with the information audit. Kind of some tips or tools. I know you have in your book at the end, you have things that people could do. And so we're not going to hit all of these, but what, like, say on that one, what are some tips and tools? What is it? And what are some things we could do?
Well, this is a mindset that's near and dear to my heart because of all of these technological influences and some of the social trends that are occurring. Let me just make you aware of some of the social trends that we write about in the book. This whole notion of people not being able to think critically. Those kind of trends are just very, very worrisome from the standpoint of agency. Agency is a very fancy word, but let's break it down. All it is motivation. Do you feel that you can go out and do anything that you set your mind to? Or do you feel like there are so many encumbrances, there's so much complexity, there are so many factors from your past or from your whatever makeup that prevent you from living the life that you want? That's what we mean by agency here. So this is near and dear to my heart, because during those journalism days, I had the good fortune to interview the Dennis Whateleys and the Zig Ziglars and the Norman Vincent Peales and all of the Earl Nightingales and all that. And just have a personal tutorial with the,
Wow.
I was writing an article for a magazine or a newspaper, but I just found that I learned best that way at the knee, just one-on-one. I would study that person's ideas and whatever for maybe a week prior to the interview, and then just listen to the tape over and over again. And wow, I did, it
And
just
it's so, as you're speaking, Robert, I'm really lulled into a great memory that I'm sure our audience might not recall, but I'm sure you can, which is being mentored by people like Peter Drucker and Warren Bennis. And when you have those conversations with them, and you see the power of human agency, right? And
right.
the parables they would use to explain how simple things really are, but how complex the human mind actually makes them. That's the human agency,
Mm,
right? And you're
Mm-hmm.
giving people new hope, which is you have the power here to think about those things that are most important to you. But there is a trend that is in this conversation somewhere, somehow, some way that you're going to get sparked about. And that's where you should be going with the
yeah.
focus on human agency. Is that a good encapsulation there?
That is a beautiful and brilliant encapsulation, Kathy, because like you say, you mentioned Bennis. Now, Drucker turned me down, so I never actually got to interview him. I've certainly heard him speak, and what a powerhouse. But Warren Bennis, oh my goodness gracious! And you all are into leadership, and I mean, there's so many ways to take this, but yes, when you hang out with these great folks, if you avail yourself to them, your mind just expands. The sense of possibility of what you can achieve in your life, there are no barriers. I am going to walk over broken glass to get where I want to go here. You're not going to be stopped. Unstoppable is your middle name. And that was me, and that is still me. And I don't want to take up all the time on agency because there's so many other important mindsets here, but absolutely.
But it's a good introduction to
Right.
that preparedness. It's a good
Yeah.
introduction to
Yes.
all those other
And
mindsets.
Right.
and I know, Robert, you're kind of making the shift into kind of from innovation more into human flourishing. And
Right.
we're both, Kathy and I are both fans and have talked a lot about positive psychology. So even in your book around human agency, to reflect more on your successes and what going back to the curiosity, what allowed you to be successful, who were the people that you brought in, what were the specifics. We love that term for Barbara Fredrickson. How do you build and broaden on your successes? Because many times we put it in the rearview mirror and we don't build and broaden on that.
That's exactly right.
All right. So, anything else you want to say about the human agency? Because
No, no,
flourishing? Because I think
no. I
that's
mean, we can talk about flourishing. Yeah, I've come upon the flourishing movement.
yeah.
You talk about a trend that I sort of missed for a couple of years. It started about 2016, if you can believe that, by a Harvard professor and a Baylor University professor. And it is a strong and growing trend based on a lot of research about human flourishing.
Uh-huh.
The irony there is that when you go out and they've interviewed 200,000 people in 60 countries, I think it is. Are you flourishing? Are you thriving? Right.
Right.
And turns out that in many other countries, developing countries, mid-level countries, that people say, yes, I feel like I'm thriving. But when you talk to people in the United States, maybe in North America, New Zealand, Australia, Western Europe, it's just the opposite. And
Yep.
so I think that there is a kind of a correlation here between all of the changes that we are absorbing and our isolation, some of the social trends of isolation, which the Surgeon General has called a pandemic.
Yeah.
and the way that technology companies want to isolate us even more, right? So that everything is transactional, nothing is relational. You
Yeah.
know, just that's their goal. You know, and people need, I'm not telling the two of you anything new, but people need a certain amount of relational. And so we're sort of plummeting down to the baseline on what that minimal amount is, but all of these negative effects are already starting to take place and mushrooming.
Mhm.
So how about this preparedness concept?
Right.
How do we we know there's a global energy crisis. There's a research report that's written every year by 6 Seconds, good friends, Josh Friedman and his wife Patty, 277,000 people around the world and 100 and some thousand, 100 and I don't know, I want to say
Yeah.
60 countries. We've seen a downtrend since the 2018. That was even before COVID. We saw a big hit after COVID. A lot of people now are hoping that the new report that comes out soon will show an increase in our resilience. But if there are any tips or techniques for preparedness to rise out of this, to see ourselves through this, I think what would be great is if we could focus on how we can help ourselves instead of the doom scrolling, right?
Right. Yeah.
And the isolation, right?
Yeah.
And there are many software companies out there now creating the teamware for people to be able to do that.
Yeah, that's a very good point. I think it starts in our families. I think it starts in our lifestyles. Um, for example, my daughter and her family are visiting us now. They have an 8-month-old or 9-month-old, and they have a policy: no screens. So if I'm on the computer or television even, and I think that's a wonderful policy. And so I think it's just taking it one step at a time and asking ourselves, is this moving me as an individual, as a leader, into a place of expansiveness and abundance, and or is it just the opposite? Is this activity, is this habit that I have, where is it leading? For example, sometimes because I'm an introvert, I'll want to isolate instead of going and being with such and so group or whatever. And I'm talking about in my personal life. And I'll just like remind myself, no, go out with your biking team, and instead of maybe working in the garden, which I really love to do, just because
Right.
I know that we need a minimal amount of social interaction. And so I think you just have to take it on an individual basis. I
Yeah.
think this is a great way for
No, absolutely. And
Oh,
that's a beautiful place for us to take a quick break too, because I think one of the things that you said that's so powerful that I want to come back to after the break, and Relly will lead us in that direction, I'm sure, is the swings in generations in terms of how much screen time is good,
Right.
how much introspection is good, how much of any of this stuff is good for each individual on those terms. So don't go away. We're having a delightful and a very preparing conversation with our guest, Robert Zucker. Come right back.
Welcome back to Leadership Development News. We're talking with Robert Tucker, his new book, Build a Better Future, Innovation Resources. Even during the break, we have so much stuff that we can talk about and try to zero in for you, the listener. And one of the things that we talked about was human agency. And both Kat and I are, fans of emotional intelligence. And Kat, you mentioned some of the research is people are losing their inner spark. Now, Robert talked about that and around the human agency. And then also, Robert, I think we've all said this is, are we getting dumber?
Mhm.
Because I'm a
Obviously,
psychologist.
yeah, I think I'm getting dumber because I said
Yeah,
Robert Zucker, it's Tucker.
Tucker.
This is the thing that happens to our brain, right?
Yeah, yeah.
We get
So,
into that process.
right. And I
Right.
think I would say I've given IQ tests, part of my training. No executive wants to hear they're operating with less IQ points. Unfortunately, we are all, given everything we're saying here, Robert, we're all operating with less IQ points. So maybe you can talk about kind of the thinking and then kind of weave that back into your key mindsets, because it's all, like we said, about how do we think. And if we're on autopilot, we're not thinking. It's the same thing we did yesterday.
That's right. Yeah, that's a big rally point there. And I totally agree because it does if we allow ourselves to get into these thinking ruts, then all is lost. I
Right.
think shifting out of that, shift happens. Shift happens when we make it happen.
Yeah.
And that's what this whole notion of disrupting ourselves is about. It's hey, have a little conversation with myself. Hey, I think I'm in a rut here. I think I need to, do this and that. But back to this whole notion of agency. Look at how we all are into this really high productivity, we think, of multitasking, and we're just doing it through fairly well. So what I look for are what's the antidote to that? Snake bite, yeah, antidote. And the
Hmm.
antidote is deep reading. Close off all screens. Maybe read a book. I'm reading an incredible book right now. I'll jump to another one of the mindsets, but by David McCullough, the famous, can you see that? The
Yeah.
famous uh, historian. America, United States of America, is blessed with great historians, and they bring George Washington and people who have lived in the past, they bring them to life in the most beautiful way. And that is so nourishing. And that is
Hmm.
such an antidote to multitasking,
Yes.
AI, and all the fakeness of AI and so forth. It brings us back. It brings us back. So deep reading, very, very important. Those are that's one technique, but we forget to do it, right? Buy a hardback book, I mean, and read it and go through it with a yellow highlight marker. Yay, the old school.
That's
Right?
what I have. Yep.
What
I love
happens
it.
is we're faced with choices every single day because of this new period of rapid change that we're living in.
Yeah. Yeah.
If you're a student, let's say you're a college student. Now you have a choice today that you and I, and the three of us didn't have when we were in college. And that is the choice of letting AI write your term paper.
That's right.
But guess what? You're cheating yourself because writing is thinking and writing is rewriting.
Yeah.
Right.
And in the process of that, we're sort of peeling the onion. We're getting to the essence of it. And
We find our voice,
we
right?
find our voice. If you have never found your voice, if you've
Yeah.
never done a deep dive into a piece of writing, if you've never gotten stuck in the mud of trying to write something and then you don't have that experience, right? But see, all of us are writers. And so don't want that to be lost because, as I said in this article, that's when Chat GPT does make us stupid. If
Mhm.
we're not doing that kind of thing, that kind of mental work,
Right.
there's
Oh, it takes our vision away,
it
right?
takes a very, exactly.
So let's say talk about the long view, because I think some of what you're saying is I'm hearing you, Robert. The brain is always kind of seeking patterns. and it's
Correct.
usually around protection. But
Right.
I think with AI and the things you're saying, we're so transactional, we don't have that free thinking time to see a pattern in the past. Or what does this tell me about the future? And it's that pattern connection. And so you have two of them, the long view and the visionary mindset, and anticipatory, that I think are trying to get into what's the pattern, what's the trend, where are we going?
Well, that's exactly right. And I love focusing on that word. What's the pattern? What the pattern, right? AI, you can farm out to AI and it does a fabulous job of pattern seeking. That's why it's able to write, right? Because it predicts the next most
Right.
obvious or the next word. And that's how it comes out. There's no brain there working, right? Um, so the long view mindset is a favorite because it gives you the pattern of history that was occurring back then with that person in their life. Because you have to realize that, let's say it's Washington crossing the Delaware or making some really bold strategic move there during the Revolutionary War. He didn't know how the story was going to turn out. And so that is a vital
Mm,
part of what I believe to be the mindset of preparedness for the future. The navigational mindset. You've got to have a love or a respect for history, and the way we drink in history most beautifully is through these wonderful biographies, but also through just visiting foreign countries and going to places like Prague and
yeah.
going to the Jewish ghetto there and experiencing the lives that those
Right.
people led, right? I mean,
Yeah.
um,
There's also something else, though, that I think we're missing, Robert, that I would love your thoughts on. And, Relly and I certainly have experienced this in our personal lives. I think living with people who are also neurodiverse, people who have different ways of looking at the world,
Yeah.
uh, are also a great way for us to connect in unique and compelling
Mm,
ways that give us a perspective. I loved a video I once saw of IT professionals in a Google environment, and you see people who are without sight. You see people who are working with their feet. You see people who have a different sensory perspective, right? And that's all you're asking people to do. Find a new and different
yeah.
opportunity
Yeah.
for that sensory perspective, which is so
Yep.
powerful.
Yeah.
it very much is. Yeah. Churchill said something that I always come back to, and I think it has to do with what your point is. He said, "The farther back that you can look, the farther forward you can see."
Mhm.
And I think that means looking back in your own
Yeah.
life. Wow, how did I handle that particular challenge or that particular era of
Yeah.
my life? And what did I learn from that? And I even think like just looking at old photographs of your family. Oh wow, I was 10 years old there, or whatever, and comparing and contrasting that with maybe our grandkids or our own kids, and those sorts of things. Visiting museums, I think, is a
Yeah.
wonderful,
Yeah.
powerful way to kind of exercise this long view mindset. I mean, the number of people majoring in history right now is on the decline, and I think that's very
So,
sad to me. It's
right.
potentially dangerous, and since if we lose that sense of history, because as the man said, those who forget their history are condemned to have to repeat their history.
Exactly. One of the things I think you have around the long view, is this exercise of really thinking about the next, 10 years and, really programming our mind because it's on autopilot and it's on the default mode network and it's just going, and we really need also the default mode network can be the imagination network. And
Right.
so where do I want to be? Because I think if we're not good with this, it goes into worry and anxiety versus programming it for where do I want to be and what does that
Right.
look like? And then it brings that dopamine, that stimulation, and then the brain, and I think you have it in your book. Okay, so what are the steps? What are the milestones? What do I need to do to get that long view?
Exactly. That it does kind of lead us into these other two mindsets, anticipatory and visionary. Um, I'll tell you a little story here. During that period, as I was a journalist in Los Angeles in the early '80s. There, I recall having going to a lot of these uh, personal development seminars
Right.
from Waitley and all these other blokes. And one of the things that they all sort of agreed on was the power of visualizing
Yes.
the future that you want, right? And back then we didn't have vision boards. So, the big thing was like tape it to your bathroom mirror, that Maserati that, and it was all kind of materialistic a little bit, but that's whatever. And I didn't do any of that sort of thing, but what I did was like every New Year's Day, I would try to take some time out to kind of write out my goals and so forth. And on this particular New Year's Day that I'm thinking of, I think it was probably 83, 84. I visualized the life that I want to be living, in the future. I don't know that I had a particular date on that, but I wanted to be, and I wrote this down. I wanted to live in Santa Barbara, California, in the hills. I wanted to have a view of the ocean, and I had some very specific notions there. But at the time, I lived in this apartment that was about the size of a postage stamp. The joke was that you had to go outside to change your mind. It was so small, and yet, guess what? I am today humbly living in that house with those views and with that. And I
And
really do believe in the
absolutely. And Robert, as I'm listening to you speak, and I hope you're giving some great, great opportunities here for people to take note that when we put our mind to something and we truly engage our heart and our mind, we can make those things happen. And it's the human agency, the preparedness, the
Mhm.
long view. It's that, as you said beautifully, that focus on a little bit of ourself in the context of that vision that gets us to where we want to go. It's such a beautiful place for us to start to close the show. And I don't know, I guess really I'll give the two of you the last word here, but this has been an amazing conversation for this time of year. And it's so beautiful to revisit the names of all these wonderful people who have contributed to all of our greatness, both as leaders and coaches. So thank you.
So Robert, yeah, we got maybe the last kind of things to kind of sum up. Where you going with this? I know you were very excited about the book coming out. Are you going to do more speaking about it? Kind of like how are you? What's the next step in bringing about building a better future?
Well, I think that, it's for me, it's yes, I'm promoting this book, I'm doing seminars on this and webcasts and so forth. But longer term, I think, just sort of cogitating on what are the elements of success in this new era of very rapid change. And many of the elements are ancient, that they're not changing. But
Mhm.
there are a few here that we may need to sort of take note of that we need to add to our repertoire. And I think the way we take in
Yep.
information, our lifelong learning, is a big part of that. I think spawning our curiosity and
Yep.
making sure that, as you mentioned, that inner spark continues to sparkle
Yes. Yes.
in this new year and beyond. And trying to figure out, hey, if it's not sparking,
What
what
do
do
I
I need
do?
to do? What changes, what
Yes.
coaches do I need to hire to help me to get to that place where I can really, just in that field, that beautiful field behind you, just take off and start running.
There you
Get
go.
over to those wine grapes.
I'm running. I'm running. I'm in the
Celebrate.
car. I'm going as fast as I can.
There you go. Well, let me leave us in this. What can you do in the moment? So one of our favorite tools is called the emotional audit. You can do it
Oh
in
boy.
15 seconds. What am I
Okay.
thinking? And you kind of pause on that. What am I feeling? Pause on that. Is there a pattern? What do I want right now? Is always going to be different. And how am I getting in my own way? So that's the obstacle that you talked about or the threat. And
Right.
then the question is for the long view, what do I need to do differently now
Yeah.
to
Mhm.
be my best? As we start the new year, what do you need to do differently now to be your
Yeah.
best? Just notice what comes up in your mind. It'll give you that vision. It'll give you those steps.
Beautiful. Beautiful,
Yep.
Roy. What do I need
Well,
to do?
thanks. Thanks everybody for tuning in to tune up your leadership here on Leadership Development News. Thank you, Robert Tucker. Great to see you again.
Great to see you. And thank you for having me on.